All right, let's dive into something huge that's happening right now. A massive shakeup in how the entire world does business. The old playbook for global trade, it's pretty much being rewritten as we speak thanks to geopolitics, new tech, and just a whole new set of economic priorities. And you don't have to take my word for it. The financial analysis firm FSM1 Singapore put it bluntly. They just came right out and said, a global trade war is here. I mean, that one sentence really captures the kind of turbulence we're seeing all over the global economy. Okay, so headlines are one thing, but what's really going on behind the scenes? That's what we're going to dig into today. We're going to cut through the noise, look at the actual data, and figure out the real trends that are reshaping how countries and companies do business with each other. So first up, let's talk about the rise of what you could call the new walls of trade. We're seeing this incredible surge in protectionism, and it's having a very real, very direct impact on how goods are moving around the planet. And I mean, just look at how steep this increase is. The average tariff on manufactured goods more than doubled in a single year. It jumped from just under 2% all the way up to almost 5%. That is a massive policy change happening in a ridiculously short amount of time. And you know, it's not just about tariffs either. The bigger picture is even more striking. In 2025 alone, countries put more than 3,300 new restrictive or discriminatory trade measures into place. Now compare that to just a few years back in 2020 when the number was barely over 600. It's a crystal clear pattern, and it's accelerating. So what's the big deal? Why does this matter? Well, the key thing here is uncertainty. All these constant changes to the rules create a ton of it. If you're running a business, how can you possibly plan or invest for the long haul? It just throws a giant wrench into those finely tuned global supply chains that our whole modern economy is built on. And all of this disruption is leading to something we're calling the Great Supply Chain Scramble. Geopolitical pressures are literally forcing companies to pull out the map of global trade and start redrawing it from scratch. And you can see that rerouting happening right here in the numbers. It's actually pretty wild. Look at the split. Trade between the US and Vietnam grew by more than 18% above the global average. At the exact same time, trade between the US and China dropped by over 14%. This isn't random. It's a deliberate realignment of supply chains happening in real time. But it's not just where we trade that's changing, it's also what we trade. There's this fascinating trend that some people call servicification. Check out these growth rates. Digitally delivered services are expanding at over 7% a year. That is nearly double the growth rate of physical goods. The very nature of trade is shifting from atoms to bits. And to put that into perspective, services now make up a whopping 27% of all global trade. This is not some small niche market we're talking about anymore. It's a core driving force in the entire global economy. At the same time, we're seeing another huge shift on the map, the explosion of so-called South-South trade. Back in 1995, trade between developing countries was worth about $500 billion. By 2025, that number skyrocketed to $6.8 trillion. If that doesn't scream rising economic power of the global South, I don't know what does. Okay, so where is all this headed? Well, let's turn our attention to what look like tomorrow's economic battlegrounds. And they're being defined more and more by the race for green technology and the critical resources you need to build it. This one number really tells the story. Environmental pledges from over 100 countries could potentially cut global emissions by 12% by 2035. But, and it's a big but, getting there is going to take a monumental shift in tech and resources, and that whole shift is going to be driven by, and in turn reshape, global trade. And right at the heart of this green transition are things called critical minerals. Basically, these are the essential ingredients for everything from electric car batteries to wind turbines. And here's the crucial part. Their supply chains are often super vulnerable to disruption. And you can see that risk plain as day in the data. Look at the absolutely wild price swings for lithium. It peaked near $80,000 a ton, then came crashing back down. This incredible volatility makes it extremely difficult to plan the kinds of long-term investments we need to secure these minerals for the future. So this leads us to a central dilemma, a real catch-22. On one hand, you have countries scrambling to secure their own supplies, using things like export controls and building up national stockpiles. But those very actions can destabilize the global market and scare away the new investment that we desperately need to find more supply. It's a tough spot to be in. So, how do we navigate this new, much more complex world? It seems to require a fundamental shift in our mindset, moving away from that single-minded focus on efficiency that has dominated for decades and toward a new, more strategic priority. And here it is. This is the core takeaway. For years and years, the ultimate goal of global trade was maximum efficiency. Find the absolute cheapest place on earth to make something, full stop. Today, the new watchword is strategic resilience. It's about building supply chains that can actually withstand a shock. Think about a car maker sourcing computer chips from 3 different countries instead of just one, even if it costs a little more. That, right there, is resilience in action. Which brings us to our final, critical question. The old map is being torn up. The world of trade is definitely getting more complex, more fragmented. But here's the thing. Every major shift like this also creates new openings. So in this new world, where do the new opportunities lie? That is the multi-trillion-dollar question for the next decade.